just kept pushing.
Well, there's a lesson in that, because that is, you were a chronic, want to fix and improve things. You
Yes.
want to see improvement. But then it was a combination of other people, it sounds like, coming to you and also saying, you got to do this, we need you. And there's a lesson in that for folks in this room, if I may say. You've been a speaker and a mentor to many in their public service career, and if they're gonna run, and if they might be interested, you might be the one encouraging someone to do that.
And I've done that. I've done that. You know, when I came to the assembly, I was shocked that I was the first African-American south of Los Angeles to be in the state assembly, male or female, when I came to the assembly in 2012. And I said to them then, I may be the first, but I will not be the last. And I immediately went to work to find other women, because we were pushing women at the time. We didn't have enough women in the assembly, to find women, to find young men, to find anyone who had an interest and showed a passion and a desire to move forward. And because I saw what happened when Tony Atkins said, I will help you. And she did. You know, she introduced me to folks that I needed to know at the state level. So when you want to say you should run, you have to be prepared to also take them there, not just leave them at the corner, but actually get them in the room, get them there, put them in spaces so they can meet other people and hear what people are saying and doing, and really begin to develop the confidence that you can make that change. And so I decided at that point, I said, I may be the first, but I'm not gonna be the last. And we began to work in San Diego, and San Diego has never had a large number of African Americans in office, period. Maybe one, maybe two, every now and then. Right now we have about 10 or 12 or 15, if we count around the county. We've got not only another assembly person, but we've also got a senator that we've never had before. We have a board of supervisors of the first African-American woman. We have a city council person. I can go through the list of those in, not only immediately there, the mayors of very small cities, you know, the city council members. So we have actually, this last election, everybody in San Francisco was calling and said, what did you do? You know, what we did was encourage people to actually run, to get engaged, to find out what the process was, and to introduce them to San Diego.
To help them, like help them get in the room.
Help them get in the room, and that's their task. They do it for others who would like them to make sure they can get in the room. And so we had never had but one African American. Now we've got so many. We have to have special places to have a party, and then of course they get staff and all those things. So it grows in a small place where our population is 4 to 5% African American in the whole city of San Diego, and yet we have good representation.
Well, let's talk also about that time in the assembly, and I'm trying to think of different words if you had to describe, you know, characterize yourself and your style as a legislator. A word that comes to mind for me is you were a reformer. You wanted to reform. You had specific areas that you worked on: public safety, education, civil rights. How would you characterize yourself as a legislator? If you look back on that and say, what's the thread, the main characteristic? And we'll dive into some of the issues you worked on.
You know, it's hard for me to say I'm a reformer because I am and I'm not. It's like people ask me, are you liberal or conservative? I said, neither. It depends on the issue. I don't want to reform everything. I'm not going to get rid of the police. You know, I live in the real world where they're necessary, okay? But I know that they can give better service sometimes. And we have different kinds of things that's there. So we have folks who have these ideas that are just extreme at some point and some that are not. But I have a tendency to not be in a category. I do reform things that need reforming. And I don't things that aren't, just for the sake of doing it. I know people who do things, and even now in my office, who do things, legislators, because they want to be seen, they want to be heard, they write bills that are irrelevant, and I can go on with my concern. I will not name names, and you're not one of them. But I can tell you that I've never been a person who tried to do things that weren't important, you know, or just to be seen or be heard, you know, that kind of thing. When I've been involved in reforming things, it's because people have brought them to me, young people like you, when we were dealing with the issue of having folks not being able to use their EBT cards on campus, and the whole generation has changed to folks who are on social services, and they have cards to eat and they can't eat in San Diego State because if they do, they lose their parking space and then they can't come back, and it was just a nightmare. And that took us a couple of years to actually get that so that every campus can have an EBT card. You know, and I didn't consider that to be some radical thing, but it was really, really necessary for those who wanted to be students on our campus. And the students led me that way. They brought that to me, my students did, and we reformed it. And the legislature, I mean, the business folks resisted it. They told us all kind of fantasies about how it would cost so much money and all this kind of stuff, only to discover that none of that was true. And so we then began to deal with food insecurity, we deal with housing insecurity. We had dormitories that would open up for kids who had lost their housing for short periods of time, and they would have a couple of rooms that they have on the campuses. Every campus ended up with a food bank as a result of legislation we did, because they said you couldn't have food banks because of some obscure rule that I never memorized, but I just knew that you could get food banks on our campuses. And now our campuses have food banks in every campus, where the students were running it themselves, and that was a part of legislation that came from students. So I do reform, but I'm not a person that's looking for something to flip up in the air and change. I want things to be better.
Yeah.
Practical things that can be used.
And not just because.
And not just because you need to put your name on something.
Well, some of those issues you worked on, I remember very much education.
Yes.
Which was my inspiration for running for office, was teacher tenure and accountability, funding of our schools, and curriculum. That teacher tenure and accountability. So I'm going to take you back in the Wayback Machine.
Yes.
To a hearing, because I know this was an issue that you worked passionately on, and I did as well. This was shortly after the Vergara court case, and that had a challenge to rules for teacher tenure, for evaluation process, and others. And there was legislators like myself who authored legislation, but you were the leader in that area. And there was a hearing in December.
Yes.
So you know when you're having an informational hearing in December, it is not intended to be watched. But at that hearing, those of us who were advocating for this came up, and you were on the dais. You were the one member of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle who was kind of standing with me on fighting for that. But you were
all the way.
You were very passionate on this issue. Had to fight against some very powerful forces.
Yes.
Which legislators have to do, but this was within your own party. All right, the very influential California Teachers Association. I want to talk about what did you learn from going up against that very powerful force and getting through the reforms you got and the ones that didn't? What are some lessons for legislators on pushing back on these major issues that maybe your party is going one direction by a powerful force, but you know you need to go another way?
The whole issue of school reform and doing things that are right for kids is a very difficult issue for me. It gets to my heart and my soul, and I sit here almost in tears. Because I, as a kid, raised in the pueblos of Los Angeles, in the projects, you know, where people don't expect much of you. And we had some great teachers that had come from Alabama and Mississippi that had been brought to Los Angeles to work in these communities that were poor. And they were amazing. They were no-nonsense teachers. They took no prisoners. They basically insisted that we be excellent in everything that we do. And they were, and I've seen some of them since then. I've been on stages and they go, we know you that little Nash girl because we remember you because you do algebra. I mean, these teachers were amazing. And so, so when I come into a situation, and that's how I got on the school board, and on the school board, eventually we ended up changing, and we had students achieving. We had, for the first time, kids of color who were valedictorians in the schools across the city, and we had students achieving in science and all those things. And people didn't want that to happen. It was difficult for me to believe that there could be teachers who didn't necessarily want it, but felt it would be an obstacle or that it would be an impossible task. And for me, having come out of that experience, I know that it is not impossible for children to learn. That if you have the drive, the passion, and you meet their needs and you get their interests, you don't have to give them a whole lot of stuff, but you have to get to them and help them to understand why it's so important that they can be brilliant and that they demonstrate it and how it changes your life. So for me, this is who I am. I've done a whole bunch of other stuff in the world, and elections are important. And they're too, because my parents were never allowed to vote. They were never allowed to vote. So that's a passion. But education is my soul. It is my heart. because I know it opens doors that nothing else can open. Not money, not influence, because once you get it, as my daddy said, it is yours and nobody can take it from you. So it was hard for me to deal with this. I mean, I worked with unions and folks before, but I've always let folks know, regardless, that I could be in your union and with you and be against you at the same time. Nobody buys me. You don't own Shirley Weber. You don't buy her at any point, you know. And so as a result, when I'm fighting this battle, it's not about me, because I can do a whole lot better. I can actually become the superintendent of some of schools, and I can do things in my community that gain for me. But I want that kid to understand that and to get what I have. So when we start talking about how we're going to improve our schools, we talk around it, but we never talk to it. And even to this day, the greatest part of me that hurts the most is that California has the most amazing higher ed system in the world. In the world. Do you understand that? Community colleges, Cal State systems, UC, private systems. We have the most amazing system in the world. And we can't do the most fundamental thing, which is teach our children to read, to write, and do math. That is tragic. And I've been not only around the world, but I've also been through the countries here, the states where education is fundamental to government. And he works to change that. And I worked with one when I was representing the legislature, and he had that as his passion. And it was one of these, you know, it was either Mississippi, Alabama, one of the states where this governor says, every kid in this school is gonna go to preschool because he had grandkids. That he said that's gonna change them, and it has some of things. So that was painful for me, and I fought against my own party with many of the members who kind of believed believed in what I was talking about, but didn't want to stand up. And I fought with my Republican colleagues who would stand with me on these issues. They never failed me in voting for these issues that were important, because I worked across the aisle, because I wasn't working for anybody other than the children of California. And so I still have that, my daughter still fights it. She just got another $300 million or something, so she still fights it because she knows what we've done as a family and as individuals in fighting in San Diego and across the nation to give people that opportunity to vote. And so I learned clearly from all of that I would never give up. I'm never going to give out and never give in. I'm not going to cop out and say, okay, well, you my friend, I won't raise this issue anymore because it's too painful. Because every time I would even think of that, the first thing I would think of, how painful is this for some child that I never raised a voice for? How painful is their life? How painful would my life have been if nobody had said, despite the fact that her daddy can't read and her mom are from the South and all those things, and they have 8 kids in the family, and you know, all these things that you can list as challenges and obstacles in your life, they never gave up on me. My daddy told me, wherever you want to go, we will go. When I said, they want me to go get a PhD, Daddy, he said, what is that? And I said, well, it's the highest degree you can get, so forth and so on. And he said to me, let us go get it. And he meant every word of it.
Well,
every word of it.
I tell you, this is why it's great to be a moderator for Dr. Weber, because I could really listen more, but I want to stop you.
Okay, good.
Because I do want
you know that's my passion.
It is. And, you know, for folks who may not remember the background, this